a highly potent gas, and it's global warming potential, which means it's a heavy gas. It retains the whole discussion around global warming, and I've seen that very interesting. What is climate change? So I think all this is going to be covered here. But global warming is basically a blanket of greenhouse. So you see the way the greenhouse gases behave. Yeah? Once you get in, it's warm. There's some heat that is trapped. So because of these gases, we have more heat that is trapped than what is going back into the atmosphere. And methane has a higher global warming potential than even carbon dioxide. And that's why there was this urgent push to cut down methane emissions. But for developing countries, and even in our whole discussion on our FEC, because we gave that 32% reduction, but sectorally we broke it down and said this amount of the 43 million tons, 32 translates 46 million tons, of the 46 million tons of CO2 equivalent, this amount should come from agriculture, this amount should come from forestry, this amount should come from industry, this amount should come from transport and all that. For the agriculture sector, there are some options that have been proposed. For instance, improving, how does methane come about? And I saw someone from military, they can also be part of this discussion. During the ruminants, when they're chewing cud, you see them, it's called regurgitation. They remove your belching, they release that methane. But if you improve the yields, the food they eat, you're able to enhance digestion and you reduce the amount of emissions, methane emissions they produce. We did not propose reducing the livestock because for the country, and this ties again to the question that was asked about these communities in Mandera or Garissa or G and all that. There is that significant cultural attachment to livestock. But also we are looking at livestock under the lens of food security and the jobs it provides. And considering over 80% of the land is arid or semi-arid, so we are really left with very little land. And this is also increasing. We are left with very little land for agricultural productivity. So the options that we are pushing for is improving agricultural productivity without necessarily cutting down the livestock. And that is why we say we have a common problem, but we have differentiated responsibilities. What does that mean? We have a common global crisis, climate change. But our responsibilities are very different. We have contributed less than 0.1% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Our responsibilities should be to adapt, because once we have catastrophic events, we are the worst hit, because our resilience index, we don't have that ability to adapt as the economies in the north, the developed countries have. You see that once they have wildfires, the government stepping in a minute. They evacuate people, they host them, they do that. You see, when we have a catastrophic droughts and floods, we do national chamber for that. So we have very differentiated capabilities to respond to the impacts of climate change. And that's why, even in our NDCs, when we're looking at sectoral strategies, we're also looking at strategies that are enhancing, as it was stressed in the morning, enhancing our adaptive capacity as a country and ensuring that the economies have the priority, food security. Number one, on the National Climate Change Action Plan, the one that I mentioned, and it would really have been good if we would also have talked about the plan and for you to understand what the government is talking about. Every 5 years, there is an action plan with priorities in all the sectors that need to be implemented. The priority number one is disaster risk reduction and management, DRM. Why is that so? Because it's unfortunate, but we are reactive most of the time, not all the time. Even with the advisory that was given the other day, when was it? 2 months or 1 month ago, it was given an advisory of the March, April May rainfall. We know that we knew that were going to receive above average rainfall in different parts of the country. But what is the government doing about it, or what is our capacity to even proactively respond to that advisory? So the early warning systems might be there, although we still have inadequate capacity in that regard. Our response needs to be more proactive than reactive. So when we are talking about strategies, we also take into cognizance the context. But at the same time, let me skip the ones of communication and hand over that to Tenisi and Kennedy. I wanted to link that to the question we talked about local languages and ensuring the understanding at the local level. Honestly, this is a challenge, and I think the government has that. Let me be a bit subjective. I think the government provides the vision setting, provides the policy, provides the action plans. I think this is also now an opportunity for media. But how is media enabled to do that? That would be the question. So these are the things that you can identify in this room and seek partnerships. I mentioned partnerships. Partnerships are very important. There are civil society organizations that do a lot of advocacy. They're also doing training. PACTA, for instance, there is also the French Heinrich, the German one, they do a lot of advocacy on communication on climate change. There can be partnerships that can enhance engagement with local media and ensuring that this is going down to the local communities. But that said and done, let me also be now objective. The whole discussion on climate change as a country, we have not really gone far. This started in 2009, unfortunately. Our first national response to climate change was in 2010. Before it used to be, that's what I'm telling you, it used to be a fit for the few. Up until 2009, we had a La Nina. When was that, 19? When was La Nina? Anyone? Good enough to remember? 1997. We had the 1997, that was El Nino. 97, 98 was El Nino. Then we had a La Nina earlier, 1990, then another big one in 85. We had catastrophic events, but we have not had any national discussion on climate change. It was the very first report done by the Stockholm Environment Institute on climate change, on the impacts of climate change on the economy. It was done from the Oxford office, but with a lot of partnerships on the ground, that reflected we have up to 5% impacts of climate change on the economy. And this then woke up the government to this whole engagement on climate change. They developed the very first legislative document, the climate change response strategy. And the goal of that strategy at that time was trying to look at understanding in climate change, because there was this global regional discussion on climate change, but it had not really gotten to the national level. So even understanding the global negotiations, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and what those results from the IPCC studies or reports meant for Kenya. And then, of course, setting the pace for further action. I will have another session discussing our story, but what I'm trying to say is that we also have to be a little bit understanding of our journey on climate change. It's now the impacts and effects are significantly being felt, but nationally we have not had a very long engagement on climate change as other economies. However, now you can imagine, we even have a training on media for climate change. It is progressive, the speed needs to be, it's an urgent issue, we need to move faster. So I'm just mentioning so that you can see, I think this is a good start. We now need to know how do we engage and go to the grassroots. And these are the strategies media can provide, options media can provide. And let me promise you, I think there's also a lot of funding on this topic. If it's properly packaged, it can be presented to partners and you can get partnerships to engage communities on climate change. Up until last year with GIZ, for the long, actually most of my GIZ career was on climate change. And I know with assurity, partners can engage with local media stations. There's a big project on cooking called GCF, Green Climate Fund. It's funded from the GCF funds. And they're engaging local media stations. And maybe Kennedy can talk about what they do there, but it's really bringing out this whole discussion, trying to incentivize a transition from the traditional fire to improve cooking technologies and all that. And we can look back at something like that and look for partnerships for funding. Sorry for going into that. The other one is on I think I have one more left. No. The council, before I continue, yes, there's still a court in court. It's a very unfortunate situation, but these are things that we have to wait for the process to end. It does not deter implementation of the National Climate Change Act. Implementation is ongoing, and the biggest part of implementation is, as I mentioned, reporting. The Act establishes climate change units in all ministries, departments, agencies, requires the counties to also establish their own climate change units. And this, because of the FLOCA program, the funding was one of the prerequisites for them to get funding. Counties are now significant. Almost all counties have established their climate change units. They have personnel in the counties. They are implementing climate action. It is the reporting back that now we need to enhance and ensure that climate action is being reported to the national level. Once it goes to the Ministry of Environment, specifically the Climate Change Directorate, they publish the annual reports. They can be accessible online, and then you can see how far we've gone. However, I also understand that the fact that we don't have a council, there are some things that cannot progress because the council has a mandate. Part of the mandate is giving direction on climate policy, giving direction on resource mobilization and such. So there's also that still a gap, but we have to wait for the process to end. Lastly, I have one, I hope I've covered most. I hand over the communications was to you. Methodologies, so carbon trading, afforestation is usually easiest understood basically as one of the sectors where we have the biggest opportunities. People think you plant a tree. I agree, there's need for a lot of capacity building on carbon trading, and that can be another session. Maybe it can be featured in one of the, the curricula that you're developing, basics of carbon trading. But as a country, and Pacific alluded to that, or I think it's a PS, the sectors we need to trade carbon in. Carbon finance is an opportunity for financing our climate action, just like any other. But it's a very tedious process, and even to develop a carbon project, it takes a very long time. Because you need to understand the methodologies under which you're going to ensure that you're cutting your emissions. There's a verification process through the standard you're using. We can discuss that in another session. But the sectors, as you mentioned rightfully, afforestation is not the only opportunity we have. We have sectors in energy, around clean cooking. Actually, majority of the projects we've had so far on carbon trading are under clean cooking. We have had projects under water purification using clean energy, that's using solar. We have had projects around transport. Now is really growing, although transport is difficult because of the heavy investments in e-mobility, but it's a growing sector. We have very interesting opportunities around industry, enhancing energy efficiency in the industry sector so that we reduce energy use and also really replace the fossil fuels where possible, because industry also needs a lot of energy, which is mostly from fossil fuels, but we can reduce using where possible. So there are other opportunities in other sectors, and the government is going to develop a white list. What a white list basically is technologies and sectors under which you can trade, you can develop carbon projects. There are carbon regulations, carbon markets regulations that are in draft. I'm sure most of you maybe were engaged during the public participation process. And these ones, once operationalized, will also provide further procedures on how to develop carbon projects, where to go to government for approvals and all that. So it's about the basics of carbon trading. Yes, there's a lot of misinformation on it. A lot of communities, for instance, and I'm hoping that it's not true, but it could be true. People think you plant trees and you look for someone to develop credits for it. Do you know those trees you cannot do anything on your land? Or maybe there's that lack of information that once you plant trees on your 20, 50, 60 acres of land, you cannot remove those trees for so many years. They have to be, there is the element of permanence. They have to be there. So si unapanda tu alafu zikimaliza unakata unapanda mahindi. Now tell me, for local farmers who are coming together with a small piece of land aiming to plant trees for carbon credits, where will they get sourcing for? Where do they get their agricultural land from? Where do they get their crops from? So this is the information around methodologies that needs to be also given out. And maybe I really think that it can form part of the curriculum. Carbon trading and reporting on opportunities on carbon trading.